Hey everyone, welcome back to Your Finest Hour. I am your host, Norman Driggers. This week I wanted to talk to you about a decision I just made that has quite literally changed my life. So I just moved out to Las Vegas, coming from Hurlburt, Florida. I landed less than 24 hours ago, and I did that so I could finally physically be together with my long distance, now fiancée. We've been long distance for our entire relationship, which was unfortunate. And we did that for about 3 years. So in making the decision to move out here, I realized that there was a small framework that I can share with you that actually applies to really any major choice that you have to face in your life. And so with that, I wanted to share a short story, the framework itself, and then help you apply that for future decisions that you have to make. Jenny and I have been long distance, like I was saying, for over 3 years. While I was active duty Air Force in Florida, she has been pretty consistently building her own career in accounting in Las Vegas. My only reference point for a good and successful military couple was the expectation that she would eventually have to pick up her life and basically follow me base to base while I pursued my Air Force career. And that was both of our understanding, I want to say about a year and a half into our relationship. Probably about the 2 year mark, we sat down and had a big conversation about how she wanted to continue her career. You know, she talked to me about a lot of the ambitions that she has, the momentum that she was experiencing her career. And in that conversation, I realized that it was really unfair for me to uproot her from all of that, especially since she has such a strong support system here, knowing that it is a lot easier for me to, especially since the military has taught me how to do this, but it's a lot easier for me to be uprooted and placed really wherever and thrive in that environment eventually. Now, I will say, once we came to that realization that I was going to head out west, I had a little bit of a mental regression, I guess you can call it. I wouldn't necessarily call it a regret of wanting to make that decision, but I started letting all these little auxiliary factors kind of cloud my judgment. So the number one goal was for us to physically be together. Now, again, we were faced with the decision of how we were going to do that. But once that decision was made, I started having doubts about my life and what I wanted out of it. And it had nothing to do with her, but as a relationship, obviously I have to discuss those things with her. And most of them were career driven. So I kind of fell through this like existential crisis of leaving active duty, moving out west into the desert. I had to one night quite literally walk up to a whiteboard and write down all the things that I cared to have in my life. I tried to limit myself to only have 3 things that I said that I cared about over the next, 5 years, 5+ years. And that really helped me kind of prioritize not only what I said I wanted out of life, it gave me clarity to then give to Jamie on what I think we should do in this situation. So what I realized is I didn't want to stay active duty anyway. I wanted to commission and do something different than what I was doing at the time. And so why was I asking her to sacrifice everything that she's worked for on a path that I didn't even want to be on? And that's where the deep insight came from, where I'm starting to recognize that a lot of people are waking up in their 30s and 40s, kind of wondering how they got so far really in their career or along this path that in their 20s they said they wanted to pursue. And they're recognizing in their 40s that they genuinely didn't care about that the thing they thought was going to make them happy in their 30s. And so the deep insight that I want to leave you with is something that I recognize just simply having conversations with other people on my own situation. And what I recognize is most people are waiting until life forces them to choose what they actually care about. What I recognize is a lot of people are waking up at 35 or 45 wondering how they got so far from what they actually wanted. And so what I learned from this was you really need to sit down probably every year, in my opinion, and identify what you care about so much that if you had a list of 100 reasons not to do something, that the core things that matter most to you outweigh literally everything else. For me, it came down to three things that mattered more than my comfort zone and mattered more than, the access to the Florida beaches, which are phenomenal. It mattered, again, more than staying physically close to the friends that I've developed over the last 10 years. And that was being physically with someone who I am convinced is the love of my life, right? And so I think when you get clear on those non-negotiables, and for me, again, that non-negotiable was being with her, nothing else really matters. And the decisions surrounding that become much more obvious. Now, all that being said, the move itself was absolutely brutal. I spent a lot of my time packing alone. Then, I have a job where I travel a lot. I'm also in the Guard, so drill weekends are a thing. And in the last 30 months, unfortunately, all of those were at their highest peak. But pretty consistently, I could recognize why I was doing everything that I was doing. And a good friend of mine, Alvin, in a previous episode, talked about how important your why is. And because my why, which was getting out to her, was so strong, the how became very manageable, even when it was the most stressful. To say it plainly, I think the biggest thing that I want you to take away from this episode is a simple question, and that's whether or not you truly feel like you're living your life based on the priorities that you have set, or whether or not you're just following this script that you think you're supposed to follow. Again, in our relationship, really the only example that I had for what success looked like for us was her moving to me. And as we grew in the relationship, we kind of redefined what that meant. And even though the military has trained me to be very flexible in my living situation, that still doesn't take away from how stressful it is to pack up your home, move quite literally across the entire country for any reason. Now, in this situation, it was a phenomenal reason to do so, and I'm very happy with my decision. But it really reinforced to me that the best time to figure out who you are and what you value isn't when life forces you to choose. It's right now, while you have the power to design your path forward, and then you continue to redesign what that means and what that looks like over the course of the rest of your life. I think if you can repeat that framework consistently and also ensure to prioritize the team first, then yourself, then everyone else in order of importance, you're going to very easily be able to find out what those non-negotiables are for you that are so strong that outweigh everything else. If you can do that, you're golden. Every other decision after that doesn't necessarily become easier, but it simplifies the entire process. And I also want to reiterate that there is no right or wrong answer here, but you need to know what you're actually working towards. Once you figure out what that actually looks like, feel free to drop me a message below in the comment section and let me know what that looks like in your life, because I am genuinely interested. I've already signed up for a new jiu-jitsu gym. It was sad leaving my old one. I plan on, in 2026 at least, doing my first bike race. So the biking situation out here is super nice. I mean, it is extremely hot out here. It was 108 degrees yesterday, and I believe it's like 104 today. And so I'm going to need to figure that out. But it's been real nice. Again, I've only been here out in Las Vegas for less than 24 hours, but just being with my fiancée has been an absolute blessing. So I wanted to share this personal story. I hope you guys are able to take away what I was able to take away from it. And I hope I was able to clearly articulate the things that I worked through to get up to this point. Again, this has been 3 years in the making. And so it has been a journey, to say the least. All that said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.